Some people say, if your family doesn't love you unconditionally, maybe you did something to deserve it. And to that we say, with deep spiritual compassion, what a steaming pile of karmic nonsense. Welcome, dear soul, to another sacred and slightly sarcastic episode of Buddhist Wisdom for the Elderly, where we stir the pot, spill the tea, and occasionally drink it in noble silence. Today we're walking through one of the most painful illusions older adults silently carry, that if you're rejected by your own blood, it must be your fault. We don't think so, and neither did the Buddha. This isn't just a video, it's a guided liberation disguised as dark comedy. In each part we'll explore the phrase they use to control you, why it hurts so deeply, a real story or example, and what to realize instead. And if you only watch one part, make it part 8. Maybe you were the family's karma. Because realizing you weren't broken, you were the breaker of cycles. That's how you stop bleeding for people who call it love. So hit like, tap subscribe, and help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can keep making sacred mischief and healing wisdom for elders like you. Now get comfy, take a deep breath, and remember, you were never the black sheep. You were just the lion they couldn't leash. Let's begin. Part 1, the first rejection. When you outgrew their storybook, it didn't start with an argument. It started with a sigh, with a moment, with you realizing, quietly and inconveniently, that you were tired of playing a role you didn't audition for. Maybe you were the fixer, the peacemaker, the quiet one, or the golden child who was rewarded for never having needs. And for decades, you played along, smiled on cue, took the calls, picked up the emotional trash like it was your sacred duty. But one day, you didn't. You stopped saying "I'm fine" when you weren't. You set a boundary without apologizing. You said no without a 12-paragraph explanation and a casserole. And suddenly, you weren't just different. You were difficult. Families are like long-running soap operas. Everyone's got a role, and the writers do not like rewrites. The moment you grow, evolve, or stop being their unpaid therapist, the cast turns on you, because your growth threatens the entire plot. Now you're the villain. Or worse, the black sheep. But here's the Buddhist kicker. The self isn't fixed. It's fluid. You're not betraying the family. You're shedding the illusion they had about you. You're choosing truth over tradition, freedom over approval. And that scares people, especially the ones who still need you to be small so they can feel big. In psychology, it's called identity foreclosure, when people get trapped in a version of themselves they never chose, especially elders. You're 68, but your brother still talks to you like you're 12, like your growth expired with your student ID. But you didn't change. You just stopped pretending. You stopped auditioning for love that never paid a salary. Buddhism says the moment you awaken, the world around you doesn't throw a parade. It throws a tantrum. Your peace is not welcome in a system addicted to drama. Your boundaries are not respected by people who benefited from your silence. And yet, here you are, breathing, growing, becoming. So no, you didn't start the fire. You just refused to keep holding the match. And for that, they called you disloyal. But in truth, you were never the problem. You were just the first one to say, "I don't want to play this part anymore." Part 2, why they need you to stay small. So you started changing. Not a midlife crisis kind of change, more like an enough is enough kind of change. You started saying things like, "I need space, and I'm not responsible for everyone's happiness," which, in family terms, is basically treason. Suddenly, people who once hugged you tight now look at you like you've joined a cult. They miss the you who never said no, the you who scheduled dentist appointments for everyone but herself. Let's get one thing clear. They're not mad because you've changed. They're mad because you've stopped cooperating with the dysfunction. In psychology, we call this homeostasis. Families maintain balance by keeping everyone in their place. If you've always been the helper, and now you're healing, that healing feels like sabotage, because your new boundaries force them to face their old behaviors. Your peace exposes their chaos. Your no is an insult to their control. The Buddha taught that clinging leads to suffering. In dysfunctional families, that clinging shows up as control disguised as love. They don't actually want you back. They want back the version of you that needed their approval to feel okay. But when you become self-sufficient, silent and centered, they call it selfish. Because your growth reminds them of how stuck they are. You stopped playing the role, and suddenly you're cold, distant, not like you used to be. That's true, you're not. You used to flinch every time the phone rang. You used to swallow resentment like vitamins. But now you've got boundaries, therapy, a favorite tea blend, and they're furious about it. You didn't ruin the family dynamic. You just stopped co-signing the collective delusion. But go ahead, let them say you're difficult. That's just what unhealed people call someone they can't manipulate anymore. So if you're wondering why they pulled away the moment you stepped into your truth, it's not because you're broken. It's because you stopped shrinking, and your size made them feel small. That's not on you. That's on their refusal to grow. Part 3. Conditional love is not love. Let's talk about the fine print. The unspoken contract tucked into every "I love you" from a family member who later turned cold. You know the deal. I'll love you as long as you don't disagree with me publicly. I'll love you as long as you show up to every family thing, even if it kills your spirit. I'll love you as long as you never ever need anything back. It's not love, it's emotional capitalism. And somewhere along the line, you became an unpaid employee in the family corporation. You got benefits like guilt, silent treatments, and the occasional birthday card with no message inside, just your name in stiff handwriting like a hostage note. As we age, we start to notice which relationships were built on mutual care, and which were built on utility. You were useful, reliable, predictable. But the moment you stopped performing, so did their affection. This is conditional love, and it's really just control with a sentimental bow on top. The Buddha described metta, loving kindness, as love with no strings attached. True love is spacious. It doesn't demand. It doesn't control. It doesn't say, "I'll love you if." It says, "I love you," period. So if someone loves only the version of you that bends, dims, or disappears, then they don't love you. They love what you do for them. Gloria, 74, spent her entire life being the dependable mom, always available, always agreeable, until she got a back injury and said, "I can't watch the grandkids every weekend anymore." The calls stopped, the visits vanished. Even her birthday was accidentally missed. She didn't change. She just stopped auditioning. That's how quickly transactional love uninstalls itself when the transaction ends. If your love has to be earned like frequent flyer miles, you're not in a relationship. You're in customer service. And guess what? You're allowed to resign. You don't have to keep earning what should be given freely. You don't have to bribe anyone to love you. Because the moment love comes with conditions, it's not love, it's leverage. So here's your liberation mantra. I am not here to perform for affection. And anyone who withholds love to control you, let them. You're not a product, you're a person. And the people who truly see you won't ask you to shrink to fit. They'll love you in your full, inconvenient, beautiful self. No loyalty points required. Part 4. The invisible divorce. When they ghost you without saying a word. Sometimes it doesn't happen in one blow. There's no screaming, no slammed door, no dramatic disowning with a monologue. Sometimes it's just silence. They stop calling, they stop inviting. You find out about family events the same way you find out someone died, through an awkward Facebook post. And there you are, alive, breathing, and somehow already erased. Psychologists call this ambiguous loss, grieving people who are still alive. It's a heartbreak with no funeral, no closure. Just a slow vanishing act where everyone pretends you're still part of the family, in theory. But in practice, you're the unspoken name, the complicated one, the spiritual allergy they avoid mentioning at dinner, and it hurts. Because rejection is easier to face when it's loud. But this quiet exile, it seeps into your bones. Buddhism doesn't tell you to ignore pain, it teaches you to see it clearly. To call it what it is. Not "they're just busy," not "maybe I misunderstood." No, what you're feeling is abandonment with nice table manners. But here's the gift buried in that pain. When someone ghosts you, they reveal something profound. They never loved you unconditionally. They loved access to you. And when that access changed, so did their presence. At least with Netflix, you know when you've been canceled. Family rejection? No email, no warning, just error 404, love not found. They act like you disappeared, but all you did was stop performing. And apparently, that made you too expensive to keep around. You don't fill it with begging. You don't try to decode the passive aggression. You don't send texts that start with, "Hey, just checking in." You let the silence speak, because silence, my friend, is an answer. And sometimes it's the most honest one you'll ever get. So yes, they ghosted you, but they also freed you from a role you never wanted. From a table where your truth made others uncomfortable. From a story that required your silence to function. You didn't lose a family, you lost an illusion. And now, in the quiet they left behind, you get to hear something else, yourself. Part 5. Redeeming yourself without their approval. There comes a point in life, usually sometime after you've developed a preference for soft pants and strong tea, when you realize something jarring. You've spent most of your life waiting for someone in your family to say, "You did good. We're proud of you. You matter." But here's the truth. No one tells you at Sunday brunch. That stamp of approval? It may never come. And guess what? You'll still be okay. In fact, you might even be free for the first time. Many elders spend decades chasing parental validation like it's some golden ticket. Even at 70, you still might be trying to impress a father who's been dead for 10 years, or a mother who never praised you unless it involved a casserole dish and emotional silence. But that chase? It's a trap, because it was never really about them approving of you. It was about you believing that you weren't whole until they did. The Buddha would tell you, chasing external validation is like trying to catch the wind with your hands. It's not that it isn't real, it's just never yours to keep. Their opinion is a projection, a shadow on a wall. And the moment you try to live by it, you abandon your own light. You could start a charity, heal your trauma, become a Zen monk in a nursing home. And your family would still say, "That's great, but did you hear what Cheryl's son just did?" Here's your permission slip, right now, in writing. You don't have to earn love anymore. Not from them, not from anyone. Redemption isn't something they hand to you once you've proven you're good enough. It's something you claim the moment you say, "I am done explaining my worth to people committed to misunderstanding me." And that moment, it's better than any forced reunion, better than any reluctant compliment. It's the moment you walk out of the prison of pleasing and into the sanctuary of self. You were worthy the whole time. You just forgot. You were waiting for them to see it first, but you were always the one who had to wake up and say it out loud. So say it now, not for applause, not for forgiveness, but for freedom. Part 6. Building a chosen family at any age. So here you are, biologically related to people who don't understand you, won't return your calls, or only acknowledge your existence when they need something notarized. Congratulations. You've officially graduated from Bloodline University, and it's time for the real degree, creating your chosen family. Let's clear something up. Just because you've been hurt doesn't mean you were meant to live alone in emotional exile. Human beings, no matter their age, are wired for connection. And contrary to what your cousin posted on Facebook, your spiritual evolution doesn't require becoming a lonely monk on a mountaintop. Unless that's your thing. In Buddhism, the Sangha, your spiritual community, is one of the 3 jewels of practice. Not your blood relatives, not the ones who share your nose and temper, but the ones who share your heart. Chosen family isn't a plan B, it's the Dharma upgrade. It's where healing happens. It's where you're loved, not despite your weirdness, but because of it. Here's the rule. If they make you feel safe, seen, and slightly more alive, they're family. The friend who drops off soup when you're sick, family. The barista who knows your order and your dog's name, family. The neighbor who lets you vent about your adult children while watering your plants, family. DNA is biology, but love is chosen, over and over, without obligation. Let me tell you about Gloria. She's 78, twice divorced, and twice betrayed by her own kids. So she started a Tuesday night potluck with 3 other women from her senior center. They laughed, cried, cussed, meditated, and watched documentaries about serial killers. It was weird. It was holy. It was home. No one asked her to shrink. No one kept score. No one demanded she be anyone but Gloria, unfiltered. That's chosen family. A family tree is great for ancestry tests and arguments over Thanksgiving stuffing, but it won't call you when you're low. It won't say, "I see you," when your spirit is cracked open. It won't love you back unless the people on it choose to. So stop watering dead roots. Start planting new ones. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to fix anyone. You just have to find the ones who make you feel like sunlight again. And guess what? It's never too late to build the family your soul always needed. Part 7. Betrayal as initiation. You weren't broken, you were chosen. Let's try something radical. What if that rejection, yes, the one that broke your heart, left you sobbing in a recliner with a blanket over your knees and a passive-aggressive text in your hand, wasn't a tragedy? What if it was a spiritual initiation? Every myth worth telling starts with exile. The hero is cast out. The truth-teller is banished. The monk walks away from the palace. Sound familiar? You didn't get rejected because you were unworthy. You got rejected because you were evolving. And evolution tends to make people uncomfortable. In Buddhist lore, even the Buddha had to leave the safety of home to wake up. He saw sickness, aging, and death, and instead of pretending it was fine like the rest of the family, he said, "Nope, I'm out. I've got questions." And then he found truth. Psychologically, older adulthood is where the ego finally cracks open. You begin to question, why did I tolerate so much? What was I afraid of? Who am I when I stop performing? That's not a breakdown. That's a threshold. And family betrayal? It's often the push that gets you there. They didn't cast you out because you were a problem. They cast you out because you threatened the illusion that kept everything comfortably broken. Let's be honest. Once you started asking inconvenient questions and setting sacred boundaries, you became a fire hazard at the family barbecue. You weren't playing along. You were lighting matches. Of course they panicked. But here's the Ramdas twist. Sometimes being kicked out of the room is the only way you learn you didn't belong in it. Buddhism teaches that suffering can be the path to awakening if you let it teach you instead of just torment you. So what if their betrayal wasn't the end? What if it was the ceremony? Your soul, in its infinite cosmic sass, said, "Let's make it hurt so they don't forget." And now, you're not crawling out of shame. You're walking through fire, and somehow, you're still glowing. You weren't discarded. You were called into a deeper truth, a truer self, a wilder love. Yes, it hurt, but don't confuse pain with failure. Pain is what happens when the old story dies, so the real one can begin. And you're the main character now. So let's keep going. Part 8. Maybe you were the family's karma. Let's go a little deeper and a lot more uncomfortable. What if you weren't the mistake in your family? What if you were the medicine? Not the sweet kind that goes down easy, the bitter, burning kind that clears infection. What if your existence wasn't the problem, but the karma disruptor the family never saw coming? Let's clear this up. Karma isn't cosmic revenge, it's repetition. It's the emotional DNA passed down like an old coat. Anger, silence, shame, guilt, people-pleasing, generations of spiritual arthritis. And then you showed up, sensitive, loud, truthful, unmanageable. You asked questions, you cried too much. You didn't swallow secrets like everyone else. In short, you broke the loop. And breaking the loop, that's terrifying to people who've never lived outside of it. In dysfunctional families, someone always gets the problem child label. But what if that label was never about dysfunction? What if it was about disruption? You didn't fit because you weren't supposed to. You weren't the virus, you were the fever. A symptom of something the system refused to heal. And now, decades later, you're still being punished for not hiding the wound. You weren't the problem. You were the emotional earthquake, the spiritual fire drill, the human 404, compliance not found. And yes, they still talk about that one Thanksgiving where you overreacted. But all you did was tell the truth. They just weren't ready to hear it without casserole in their mouth. In Buddhist cosmology, bodhisattvas take on difficult births to help others awaken. So maybe you weren't dropped into your family by accident. Maybe your soul took one look at that ancestral chaos and said, "Yep, that's the one. Let's stir things up." They wanted peace. You brought purification. Not always pleasant, but absolutely necessary. You weren't the disappointment. You were the defibrillator. And sure, they still might call you selfish, difficult, or cold. But under all that, they're just scared. Scared of what life looks like without the old lies. Scared that maybe, just maybe, you weren't the curse. You were the answer. Part 9. The power of no response. When silence is sacred. There's a moment, after the arguments have burned out, the texts have stopped, and the family group chat mysteriously forgets you when you're left with silence. And at first, it feels like punishment. Cold, empty, unfair. But give it time, let the noise die down, and you'll notice something strange. That silence, it's not punishment, it's protection. In Buddhism, noble silence isn't what you offer because you have nothing to say. It's what you offer when speaking would only feed illusion. You don't need to clap back at every accusation. You don't need to defend your every boundary. Because once you've chosen peace, explaining it becomes optional. By the time you've lived 7 decades, you start to realize, not every fire needs your gasoline. Not every family guilt trip deserves a seat at your emotional table. Sometimes, the most radical thing you can do for your nervous system and your dignity is to simply not reply. Not with silence soaked in bitterness, but with silence rooted in peace. You know what's more powerful than a clapback? That moment when they send a guilt-laced message and all they see under it is seen. That's it. You saw it. You chose peace. And you moved on without turning your life into a debate club. They'll call you cold, distant, passive-aggressive. But what they really mean is, you stopped dancing when I stopped providing music. They used to say, if you loved me, you'd reply. But here's the truth. If they loved you, they wouldn't need to manipulate you into engagement. Your silence isn't avoidance, it's a sacred boundary. And in that space, you get to hear yourself again. Sometimes you don't need to explain why you're not coming to the reunion. Sometimes you don't need to unpack why you stopped texting back. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is, nothing. Because not every relationship deserves your effort. Not every wound deserves your reopening. And not every voice in your life is worth answering, especially when yours is just beginning to get clear. Part 10. You were never the black sheep, you were the lion. They called you the black sheep, the odd one out. The too sensitive, too loud, too complicated one. You know, black sheep, the family scapegoat, the designated problem. But here's a secret. The black sheep is rarely the broken one. They're just the only one who woke up in a family still sleepwalking. You weren't rejected for being wrong. You were rejected for being honest. You didn't ruin family harmony. You exposed that there wasn't any. From the beginning, you were the one who felt too much, cried when others swallowed, questioned what others obeyed, told the truth, and got punished for it. Congratulations. That's not dysfunction. That's initiation. The Buddha said, the lion's roar silences the jackal's bark. That's you. They wanted you quiet, shrinking, apologizing for being whole. But lions don't ask for permission to take up space. You weren't meant to walk in single file behind the family illusion. You were meant to roar, loudly, clearly, and without guilt. And if that scares them, that's not your problem. That's their karma shaking. It's never too late to flip the script. You may be 60, 70, 80. You may feel like you've wasted decades trying to fit into a story that never had room for your truth. But here's the beautiful plot twist. The older you get, the more powerful your rewrite becomes. Because now, you don't need their permission. You're not asking to be loved. You're choosing to love yourself. You're not the lost one. You're the one who left the herd and finally saw the horizon. They tried to keep the family story boring, predictable, linear, and then you showed up like, hey, what if we actually healed instead of hiding behind roast dinners and sarcasm? They didn't like it. They still don't. But guess what? You made the story real. And no matter how they talk about you behind closed doors, they'll always remember you as the one who broke the silence. Not too loud, not too sensitive, not too much. You were right-sized all along. It's just that small rooms hate big spirits. So don't go back to the pasture. Don't trade your roar for their approval. You weren't born to follow. You were born to lead yourself home. So, what have we really said today? We said you're not crazy for feeling hurt. You're not broken for being cast out. And you're not the villain just because you stopped sacrificing your soul to keep someone else emotionally comfortable. We walked through betrayals, dressed in silence, love with receipts attached, and family trees where the fruit talks behind your back. But through it all, one thing is clear. You were never meant to fit into their small idea of who you should be. You were meant to wake up, and sometimes awakening comes dressed as abandonment. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand you. Because while they cling to stories that no longer serve them, you, my beautiful elder soul, are walking into the next chapter barefoot, honest, and unbothered. And hey, if that roar of truth stirred something in you, don't just sit with it. Like the video. Leave a comment below. Tell us which part hit the deepest. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not the only lion in a room full of sheep. And subscribe to help us reach 1,000 old souls who still believe healing is possible at any age. Now go light your incense. Or don't. But whatever you do, don't shrink back. You didn't come this far just to stay quiet.